Well, happy Thursday. There is always so much to talk about. So I'm so glad that Megan and I are joining together again to talk about what's going on in the real estate market, what's going on with the Fed meeting that we're expecting in 2 weeks, what in the world is happening with interest rates. And of course, we all know the slowdown. So we have a metric that we're going to be showing on the second half, talking about the mortgage purchase applications. All of it not just super fantastic. Like I'm just not feeling like, yay, look at the numbers, but I am feeling a sense of joy in the sense that we all get to still work in the best industry, I think, on the planet. Personally, I'm a little biased.
I know. I love this crazy world.
I do too. So, we know that the slowdown is happening. We know that winter is coming. We know that a recession is close. We know all the things. So how we act in front of that between our clients and their fear and hearing what the media is saying. This is the quote I wanted to start out with today. So the market cannot determine your success. It determines your strategy, right? It's so important to hold on to that. And you can quote me for that, right? Because I've been really stewing on this for the last 30 days. Especially with the transition that we just made to OneTrust, and then on top of the transition that we're seeing in the housing market, the market cannot determine your success. It determines your strategy.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. Well, and it's oftentimes I feel like I'm talking out of two sides of my mouth because I can't please both sides of the transaction. What's good for the seller is bad for the buyer. What's good for the buyer is bad for the seller. And so it's always really interesting trying to find that opportunity in looking at the numbers that I'm always taking a peek at on a monthly basis to try and figure out what's the best strategy. And so right now it's great for buyers. It's a wonderful time to be in the market as a buyer. You have negotiating power again that we haven't had for 2 years plus. And so it's great to be back in the market where we actually have negotiating power and trending towards a little bit more of a balanced market. We're still far from a market in balance, but it's been great to see that we still have some of those opportunities where people aren't having to walk into homes bidding $100,000 over asking price without inspections, without appraisals, covering those gaps. And so it's nice to have that additional negotiating power right now.
And you are hearing stories, people having regret, right? Something that maybe they bought in February of this year where they thought, is this ever going to end, right? And where we did see kind of the height of the pricing market. And so getting in and now unwinding some of those folks, realizing that this is just one transaction out of many in your life, one season out of the continued change of seasons, where we do have the opportunity. We had one buyer that called me 2 days ago. They got their home $400,000 under the original ask.
Oh, wow.
It had come down 300,000, then they got another 100,000 off over that.
What was the final sales price of that property?
It was just over 900,000.
Oh my gosh.
So it had come down from up and over $1 million.
Wow.
And this is towards the Boulder market, so Boulder County. But so to still get that home, I heard that story and I was like, and the buyer, as I talked to her, she was just beaming. She was so excited. First time home buyer. Right. So that's
first time home buyer. Wow.
Forget that home buyer.
Wow.
That's what they're spending.
Oh my gosh.
But I do keep coming back to the fact that it is the market for buyers right now. They have the ability to get all the inspection items. They have the ability to negotiate price. They have the ability to take their time to really make sure that it's the home that they want. They have the ability, yes, interest rates are higher and payments are higher, but that will change and interest rates will adjust and that opportunity will come back for affordability.
Definitely. It always does. And so our markets are very cyclical. And so again, it may not be the best interest rate that you can get right now, but of course you always have the ability to refinance in the future. And so you marry the house, you date the rate. It's always a good time to buy and it's always a better alternative than renting.
It's always a better alternative. Renting is 100% interest rate.
100%. Yep, definitely. So let's go ahead and hop into the numbers for this last week. And I have some crow that I have to eat this week because unfortunately, when I went through and pulled the data for last week, we were talking about how sensational the market was. And unfortunately, when I pulled the data last week, I went through and double checked everything again this week because I was not liking the numbers that I was seeing. And so I ended up going back through and rechecking all of those numbers again to see what what was going on with the market, and I pulled the numbers and my numbers were wrong last week. And so we didn't have that big jump in the market that was kind of unexpected due to the dip in interest rates. So I'm going to go over last week's numbers and again this week's numbers, but we've continued to trend towards a softer market than what we've experienced for the last 2 years in a row. This covers data from October 12th through the 18th. And so we're looking at this the last weekend of transactions. And here's our heat map that tracks the inflow and the outflow of new business. And you can see that we're getting more and more blue as we get into the fourth quarter of 2022. Looking at what's happened over the last couple of weeks, instead of having a 1.1 month worth of inventory that we saw last week, it was actually 1.8. And so we've actually trended up even into a softer market where we're sitting at about 2 months worth of inventory, which is up from the 0.2 months worth of inventory that we experienced back over Super Bowl weekend. So that means for every one buyer in the market right now, they have about 2 homes to choose from. Historically, when we look back to 2013, since we've been in this extreme seller's market with less than 3 months worth of inventory, we usually see that a month's supply in months ends up going up through the end of the year. And so if you have somebody that is interested in selling their house this year, get them to market as soon as possible before the holiday period really starts to sink in and people are going through Thanksgiving and Christmas with their decorations up, going through that staging process to get their home under contract. So sooner rather than later, if they intend to sell this year.
If they intend to sell this year.
If they intend to sell this year. The other thing is that if they're looking to make a double move, so if they're selling in this market and buying in this market, get that listing to market as soon as possible, because again, the opportunity for buyers to negotiate right now is significantly more enhanced than what we'll likely see this spring. Looking at our average daily active count, it actually came back up again this week. And so we were up 0.7%, where we have about 7,000 average daily active units for sale. Now, historically, we end up seeing a big purge of expired and withdrawn listings at the end of September, and we haven't seen that come through this year. Our inventory is remaining higher than what we typically expect for this time of year. And so we're not quite on pace with where we've been on average from 2013 through 2021. We're still a little bit shallow in terms of our levels of inventory, but this is very much like what we saw back in 2019 for our numbers for average daily active counts. New listings were up by about 2.1%. We saw 1,000 new listings hit the market this week. Back on markets were down by 14%. So we saw 245 back on markets. Only 179 expired and 251 withdrew. We only put 809 units under contract this last week. So we saw a big dip in the number of units going under contract as we get deeper into this year. So again, month supply of inventory week over week came up by 11.4%. Again, the market is likely to continue to soften as we go into the later part of the year, watching with those price decreases and time on market. I might have to go through and rescale this graph because our odds of selling has dropped down to 46.4%. Again, the odds of selling is where I take into account all of the available listings for sale versus those that go under contract and or close that week and project it forward for a 4-week period of time. So the likelihood of you going under contract and closing in the first 30 days that you're listed is about 46.4%. We really peaked out back over Super Bowl weekend again, which was 87.3% odds of selling. So that number has continued to decline. Interestingly enough, that number actually starts to pick up as we get into October, November, and December, where we see the odds of selling increase based off of data from 2013 through 2021. And so, but that's due to the purge of expired and withdrawn listings that we haven't seen so far this year.
Right.
So unless we start to see that purge of expired and withdrawn listings coming off the market, we might not see the odds of selling increase like what we typically do going into October, November, and December. And they only increase marginally. We don't see a big increase in those number of units that are going under contract and or closing, but it's usually due to the supply dropping as we go into the later part of Q4.
So demand is
Excuse us.
Right?
Excuse us.
I'm not sure who gave it to who. So demand really isn't a factor most cases in these last couple of months of the year. Anyway, it's usually that inventory dropping off.
It's usually inventory dropping off, and we're not seeing that purge of expired listings.
But right now we're also seeing the opposite of demand as well, or maybe the extreme of demand dropping.
Right.
Right. Which is definitely highlighting this number and probably going to continue to hurt us is that inventory that maybe the buyers have swept through don't want those homes waiting until spring.
Right.
I don't imagine a lot of new buyers are coming on right now.
No, I don't imagine that there are a lot of new buyers that are coming to market right now, unless there's, oftentimes in the fourth quarter, we see more relocation transactions that are happening.
Yeah.
And so if there are more relocation transactions that are happening for people moving here to Denver, we could see that number pick up, but I'm not expecting that number to pick up drastically. And so I expect the odds of selling to remain relatively consistent as we go into the fourth quarter. We had a question pop up. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. They said no sound. We're not having anyone else say that there's no sound. Can you guys give us a clue in the Q&A section if you're able to hear us, so that we're sure that we've got audio going on?
We have audio on Facebook.
It's working. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. They're back on. All right. Great. Wonderful. Thanks, guys. So looking at where we are in terms of our market and balance. So again, a market and balance is usually about a 6-month supply of inventory. That's the transition from when we go from a seller's market into a buyer's market. And it feels more balanced right now based off of what we just went through from 2020 through 2021, going through the pandemic and having such extremely low levels of inventory that we went from going 120 miles an hour going to the speed limit. And so we're not going under the speed limit at this point, but we are at about 33.5% of a balanced market. To create that magical 6-month supply of inventory where the rate of appreciation matches the rate of inflation would be about 21,000 average daily active counts. And so we're down still at about 7,000 average daily active units with about a 2-month supply of inventory, which is still considered to be an extreme seller's market, but it's going to feel extremely different than what we experienced from 2020 through 2021 and even the beginning part of 2022. And so we just have to keep in mind what our perspective is, that our perspective is a little bit wonky right now just because of what we just came out of. This is the market that we've been praying for 2 years. And so
can we double click on that for a second?
Yes.
Right. I mean, we needed to get out of that market.
It was insane.
It was intense.
It was too much.
Unhealthy. Buyers couldn't choose. Buyers had buyer's remorse. Buyers had to pay too much. Sellers, I don't, there's a lot of listing agents listening to this, I'm sure, but sellers got a little bit greedy and wanted to take advantage of the market. Who doesn't? When you sell, you want to sell at top dollar. I understand that. But all of this was happening at such an extreme level. And all of those loans now are locked up at, under 4%, holding the inventory kind of hostage, if you will. We had to get out of it. This was the only way.
Yes. Yeah. For interest rates to go up was the only way for us to have this kind of sustainable affordability factor kick back into play.
Yes.
And so now we're expecting, and I'm starting to read more and more reports that are coming out saying that we're expecting negative appreciation next year. And I think that we might have negative appreciation for the first 2 to 3 or 4 months of next year, because we're not going to have that insane run up at the very beginning of the year like what we experienced before, especially if we don't have this purge of expired and withdrawn listings come through our market that drives our inventory down and has our buyer demand pick up earlier in the year. And so I'm not expecting there to be significant appreciation at the very beginning of next year. Our affordability factor is just way out of whack still here in Metro Denver. And until wages kick up or prices come down, we need to get into a more affordable market.
It could look very similar to just right now.
Yes.
Like I just don't see it changing per se, right? Because usually the sellers will flood the market, but if the interest rates are still high, the sellers might just wait.
Right.
So especially if we think interest rates are going to come down after the Fed meeting minutes in March, which they're expected to raise that. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But if there's any hint that we might see a drop in interest rates, maybe sellers, and I know builders too like it when the rates are lower. Right. And if they're just going to wait, then that's going to hold our inventory the same. The buyers have already gone through it. Right. The buyers have the high interest rates. We could just see this winter market into the spring.
Right. And it's really interesting because I'm starting to go through, and being in Q4, I'm starting to get a lot of questions about what my predictions are for next year.
Yes.
And I'm trying to look back into my data and trying to figure out another good time to make this comparison. And where do I go back to in order to try and figure out when have interest rates gone up this high, this fast, and what years can I compare this to? And so I'm still sticking with the month supply of inventory, and I'll probably end up removing 2020, 21, and 2022 from my analysis to create better projections for what's going to happen in 2023, because those years were just so abnormal in our market. And so I might have to kick out those numbers and have a big disclaimer in there about why I'm using those data sets in order to go through and figure out what's going to happen in 2023. So I'm struggling with that. So if anyone has any brilliant ideas for me, I'm all ears at this point. Showing activity ended up dropping last week. We had about 10,807 total showings last week, which means that you got about 1.5 shows per property per week. And so again, I'm still getting a lot of phone calls on Mondays asking me to pull the target market analysis out of showing time for them so that they can see how many showings were set by price range for that zip code so that people can see if they're on pace or not. But this could be strike one, where if you had a listing that you put up last week and you didn't get any showings on it, that you might not be in your target price point. But it's becoming more and more common that you're not seeing showings happen on that very first weekend. And
Waiting
so
to see if prices drop.
waiting to see if prices drop, kind of hanging in there. Buyers don't feel the pressure to get out there and look at every single property every single weekend.
Right.
We've got Halloween coming up, and it's we've got Halloween parties, we've got Thanksgiving coming up, we've got holidays coming up. And so again, people might just be pumping the brakes a little bit on that. Interest rates aren't doing us any favors at that point. But it's interesting to see that how much those showings have really dropped off. We're now at about 13 showings to go under contract. It's been bouncing between 12 to 13 showings to go under contract. So again, if you've had 12 or 13 showings on your property and no offers, then it may be time to take a consideration of a price reduction. But if you're only getting 1.5 showings per week and it's taking 13 showings to go under contract, if we round that up to 2, that means that you could be on the market for 6 or 7 weeks before you're going under contract. And so again, slow down the rate at which you're making price reductions, because we don't want to cut that price off too soon. And so you're waiting to make sure that you get enough showings for that property in order to get people in.
That's a hard balance.
That is a hard balance.
Because you're walking into the holidays.
Yeah.
So you want to make it adjustments quickly.
Right.
But you're right. You got to get enough showings in.
You got to get enough showings in before you go through and make that price reduction. That target market analysis from Showing Time is also a great tool to use to see if you drop the price, what price would you have to drop to in order to get more showings? And so again, the showings and the price reductions are bigger than what we're seeing, or the price reductions are bigger than what we've been seeing in the past. Median days on market for those units that went under contract last week popped up to 22. Last week it was 20 median days on market. That number was correct in the last report that I put out, so there's no correction needed on that one. Median days on market was about 22. So we're looking at about 3 weeks on the market before you go under contract for half of the homes, which is up from the 4 days on market that we experienced for the first 4 months of the year. And so we've been watching that number steadily rise. I expect that number to continue to steadily rise as we go into the back part of Q4. Price reductions. This is a big one. And so price reductions tipped over 50% of what went under contract last week made a price reduction. And so 52.6% of all the units that went under contract last week made a price reduction. 45.9% made no price reduction. And so we're seeing more widespread price reductions. Historically, for the month of October, we end up seeing about 32% of the homes make price reductions. So price reductions are definitely much more widespread than what we're experiencing typically. I need to rescale this graph. The average price reduction was 8% this week. Which has gone up again. And so looking at those comps that we were looking at back even just a couple of months ago, even after the market had started to soften, you're still pulling off of that average sales price from there. And especially if you're using those peak priced comps that sold back in April and May, we're off by about 9.4% from those average priced homes. And so you really need to pull back in your pricing strategy right now as you go into the winter months. But that average price reduction came up to about $55,000 off of the original price to go under contract. And so those are really significant and widespread price reductions that we're seeing. But an 8% price reduction, that's the largest I've seen that historically. For the month of October, we end up seeing about a 5% price reduction. So price reductions are about 3% higher than what we typically experience during this month. For homes up to $500,000, again, the cooling trend continues to settle in. We're looking at more and more blue cells across the board as we get into the later part of Q4. Under $500,000 right now, our month supply of inventory last week was actually 1.2 months worth of inventory. This week it's 1.3 months worth of inventory, with an average daily active count of about 1,800 available units for sale. Average daily active count again rose by about 2.5%. Withdrawns are not peeling off in this market either. We saw a 12% decline of withdrawns last week and a 16% decline in expired units. So sellers are really sticking in there trying to get their home sold before the end of the year. We're not seeing that purge of listings in our marketplace. Pending transactions this week fell by 6.2%. We put about 334 units under contract this last week. The odds of selling dropped down to 56.3%. So now we're back to where we were as we were in the depths of the pandemic, down to about 56.3%. That again is closer to what we saw back in 2019 with our units, with our odds of selling. And so if you list a home right now in the market going under contract in the first 30 days, you have about a 56.3% odds of selling in that first 30-day period. We're now sitting at about 21% of balance. To create a market and balance in this market, we need to have about 8,700 available homes, whereas we only have about 1,800 available homes. So this market is still pretty hot in terms of where we are for units going under contract, that they're going under contract still fairly quickly. We got about 2.1 shows per property per week in this particular price range. So if you didn't get 2 showings on your property, it may be time to consider a price reduction. We had about 12 showings to go under contract. That number has remained relatively unchanged for the last 4 months, where we've seen, or it's about the last 4 months where it's been about 12 showings to go under contract. So if you have had a total of 12 showings and no contracts, it may be time to consider a price reduction in that market. Median days on market jumped up to 21.5 median days on market. And so we saw a big jump in the number of units, or the number of days on market, going from 17 median days on market up to 21.5 median days on market. So it's about 3 weeks to get a home under contract that's under $500,000 right now. Price reductions were 52.6% made price reductions in this particular price range, with an average price reduction of about 7.7%, or about $36,000 off of the original price to go under contract for this week. So this price range, even the under $500,000 price range, is still making big price reductions, and they're seeing more widespread price reductions with more than half of what went under contract. 500 to $1 million is really the meat of our market. This represents 60.2% of our overall housing inventory. Cooling trend continues to settle in as we get into Q4. As you can see, these blue cells continue to creep in here when we look at our heat map. Months supply of inventory jumped up to 2.3 months worth of inventory. Our average daily active count for this week remained relatively unchanged, even though our new listing count ended up coming up by 4.7%. We saw 102 listings expire. We saw a jump in withdrawals where it was 164 units ended up withdrawing. So that was seeing some of the purge that we've been expecting to see in this $500 to $1 million market. The pending transactions overall fell this week by about 7.4%. And so we're looking at about 2.3 homes per buyer in this market, which is again up from the 0.2 months worth of inventory that we saw back earlier this year. The odds of selling is sitting at about 43.7%. Again, the last time that we saw that was in the pandemic, back in 2020 when we went into quarantine. Again, it's much more similar to what we saw back in 2019. In this market, we now have 38% of a balanced market. We would need to have about 11,000 homes to offset the demand in this market to get to a market with a 6-month supply of inventory. We're looking at about 1.3 shows per property per week in this particular price range. So again, if you don't have any showings in the first week, don't completely freak out. Just reach out to me and I'll provide you with that showing time report so that you guys have access to that information, so I can help guide you through where we're looking at for showings for those properties for that week. We're looking at about 13 showings to go under contract. So again, if you're getting 1 or 2 shows per property per week, we're looking at about 6 or 7 weeks on market right now for homes that are between 500 to $1 million. Median days on market stretched from 22 median days on market up to 23.5 median days on market. So again, about 3.5 weeks right now for homes to go under contract between 500 to $1 million. We saw 54.5% of the homes that went under contract last week made price reductions. So again, much more widespread price reductions than we typically see. And the average price reduction ended up jumping to 8.2% of a price reduction, which is up from the 6.9% of a price reduction we saw last week, or about $63,000 off of their original price. So pretty significant price reductions coming off the board for homes to go under contract. 1 to 1.5 million, this market is also cooling. We ended up seeing that our month supply of inventory jumped from 2.2 months worth of inventory last week up to 3.3 months worth of inventory. So our pending transaction count fell by 33%, which is what drove up that number. Our average daily active count actually came down by about 0.2%. So we have about 547 available units for sale in this market. Back on markets ended up falling. Expired units ended up declining. And so we're not seeing the purge from expired listings. We did see an increase in withdrawn listings for this market. But again, with 3.3 months worth of inventory, we now have, for every 1 buyer in this market, they have about 3.3 homes to choose from. The odds of selling is now down to 37.5%, which is still better than where we were in the pandemic. It's back again closer to where we were back in 2019. And so if you're looking for how the market is going to function, looking back at average days on market, looking back at the odds of selling, looking back at units going under contract back in 2019 is a good market to compare this against, because that's also where we saw interest rates go from 3 to 4.5%. Now they've gone from 3 to 6.5, 7%. So it's a different market. We've seen interest rates go up much higher, much more quickly, but it's interesting to see that the odds of selling is still hanging in there. This price point is much less sensitive to what's happening with interest rates. And so again, they're not as focused on what's happening with interest rates. And so they're not going to see quite the same bobble in the marketplace. This market has about 36.8% of the inventory required to offset demand, with about 1.4 shows per property per week. We're looking at about 20 showings to go under contract based off of this last week. And so this number is going to bang around a whole bunch just because we're dealing with a smaller subset of properties. And so it's interesting to see that it jumped up to 20 shows to go under contract. It's been slowly increasing as buyers have more choices out there, where we're seeing people look at more homes before going under contract. 11 median days on market, which is interesting because median days on market is actually declining. And so there's an active pool of potential buyers that are sitting out there looking for homes between 1 to 1.5 million that are just waiting for that perfect home to come on the market. And those perfect homes that are staged well, that are priced well, are going under contract very quickly. And so it's all about teeing up your listing to be the best presented property against all of the other competing listings out there to go under contract. But median days on market was only 11 for this last week in this particular price range. So there is a very active pool of potential buyers in this market. Price reductions, we only saw that 21.6% of what went under contract last week made price reductions. So we're seeing fewer price reductions in this over $1 million price segment. The average price reduction was 5.6%, or about $85,000 off of the original price, which is down from the 9.2% of a price reduction that we saw in the week previous. 1.5 to 2 million. So this is the last price range that I can measure on a weekly basis. This only represents 2.8% of our overall inventory in Metro Denver, and these numbers tend to bang around a whole bunch. But again, the cooling trend continues to settle in as we see fewer and fewer showings that are happening in this particular price range. We're sitting at about 3.3 months worth of inventory, up from the 3 months worth of inventory that we saw just the week prior. We have our average daily active count. We have about 202 listings available for sale. We put about 15 units under contract each week in this particular price range. Back on markets, where only 4 came back on market, which was no change over the previous week. And so those listings are sticking if they're going under contract. We're not seeing the big purge of expireds and withdrawals from this week. And so again, only a few homes are peeling off at any given point from this particular market. The odds of selling were up to 37.3% odds of selling at this particular price point, which is still much better than what we were experiencing back in the pandemic, where it's still roughly double what we were seeing back in the pandemic. Again, much more closer to what we saw back in 2019. We have 27.6% of the inventory required to offset demand. So I'm not expecting a large severe market correction to take place in this $1.5 to $2 million market. We saw about 1 show per property per week in this $1.5 to $2 million price range, with about 13 showings to go under contract. And again, it's been about 12 to 13 showings to go under contract for every week that we've been looking at these numbers. We had 40 median days on market. So we saw some of those homes that had aged in the market peeling out of the market after making some price reductions and corrections this week. And so it was about 40 median days on market, which is the highest that we've seen that number since we were back in the winter months of 2021. And so median days on market really stretched out. And again, median days on market tends to go up from there. But we did have a nice purge of some of those older listings in this last week. 76.9% of them made price reductions that went under contract this week.
It's surprising to me that that's so different than the 1 to 1.5.
Right. We're only dealing with about 15 transactions in this particular price range. And so again, that number can bounce around all over the place. We've been bouncing between 30 to 50% going under contract with price reductions, but it was 76.9%, again, leading me to believe that some of that more aged inventory finally came down and peeled off the market going under contract. Average price reduction this week was about 8.4%, or about $155,000 off of their original asking price. And so again, some of that aged expired inventory really peeling off at the higher price points, but inventory has continued to soften. You've got the corrected numbers for this last week now, so hopefully that helps with everything. It looks like we had 1 question pop up, and so we'll get that answered, and then we'll turn it over to Nicole for her piece. And so So a lot of questions about
It's
comments about sound. So thanks. I'm so glad that's working this week.
one person didn't have their volume up.
Yeah.
But we're so used to not having sound.
Yeah.
That we're just like, oh no,
Yeah.
not again.
It just happens.
It does. All right, here we go.
Can't recall exactly how you worded it. Can you mean by a balanced market when appreciation matches the level of inflation? So that's the point where you're not gaining appreciation, you're not gaining value on your home, but you're not losing value on your home. So that's the point at which we are looking at the same rate of appreciation matching the rate of inflation. Typically happens when we have a 6-month supply of inventory, where we have a market that's an even playing field between buyers and sellers. There was one other question: with over 50% of homes under 1 million having price reductions of $50,000 to $60,000, buyers sitting on the sidelines waiting for reductions, especially on new homes, especially if it's not priced right. Thoughts? Yes, definitely. People are waiting a little bit longer to see what the activity looks like on a home for the first week or two, and then they're waiting for those price reductions to roll through. But for homes between 1 to 1.5 million, again, median days on market has been around 10 or 11 for the last couple of weeks, and so there's that active pool of potential buyers that are really ready to go out and suck up those properties if they're available. 1.5 to 2 million is a little bit softer, where we're waiting for those price reductions to come through before people go in and snatch up those homes. I think that's all the questions that we had, and that takes us right to 10:31. So I stole 1 minute.
Oh my gosh, we spent way more than 1 minute at the beginning. So that was fine. No, and it is interesting. New builds. We saw housing starts and permits came out this week, and we're going to talk about those numbers in just a second. But we're definitely seeing builders getting aggressive, trying to get any of those homes that aren't already under contract. Any buyers that have fallen out. We're seeing either discounts in home prices. We're seeing rate buy downs, massive rate buy downs. Builders are almost foregoing the "I'll finish your basement" for the "I'll buy your rate down" strategy. And I think it's working, because coming up with some really low interest rates is definitely more appealing. I've gotten several conversations and inquiries about, how low can the rate go if I had X number of points to buy it down. As a listing agent working with a builder looking for opportunities to create success in that space, and definitely can go through those numbers, whether it's a 3-2-1, a 2-1 buy down, or just a permanent buy down, if you have enough money to put that down, and you have the loan scenario that allows it, because that's the other part. If you're putting minimum down, you're going to have restrictions on the percentage of an interested party contribution. So you have to kind of look at both things. One is how many points will it take to get down far enough to make a difference, and then two, does it fit within the parameters and the guidelines of the loan program? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to jump in a little bit different, because I really want to go off of this theme around what do you do in a market such as this. So I inquired with a few of my agents, and I'm going to continue to inquire. I thought, you know what, going through this period of time, I really want to hyper focus on what is new, what can we do different, what do we need to be doubling down on. There's a saying of going back to the basics. I know some people don't like that, but I will say, I was listening to a podcast this morning, and he was talking about the baseball teams that win continue to focus on the very fundamentals, right? It's the pitching, it's the hitting, it's the catching. It's not the fanfare, it's not the marketing, it's not all the other stuff. It's, I got to get the basics down and then do all the other stuff. So listening to a couple of these podcasts, I'd be happy to share some of the ones that I've really found most enjoyable or most valuable to listen to, because I have this much time left over to do something like listen to a podcast. So I make sure that there's a lot of gold nuggets in the ones that I'm listening to. So I'm happy to share those as well. So the market isn't about determining your success. It's determining your strategy. We can all say that we had a phenomenal last 2 years. We all did, right? Title, lenders, real estate, we all did. It was great. So, it's a question of, did you pinch any of those pennies? Did you save any of them? Because here the season is changing. And in fact, I had to bring it up. Winter is here, right? People keep talking about winter is coming. No, winter is here. The recession is coming. I don't think the recession is here, but I do think that the housing market has shifted, and is creating opportunities for buyers. It's certainly creating stress for sellers, and it's putting all of us on a little bit of edge. How are we generating business? How are we staying relevant? How are we keeping in front of our clients when they need us most? Because people will continue to buy, they will continue to sell. There is life events that will continue to happen. in any season. This is cyclical. Every economy is cyclical. We're just happening to go into a downward economy, and that's the cycle that we're in. So a couple of people that I talked to. So Sharon Eisner, thank you so much for allowing me to share your nuggets of gold. She just simply said, I'm doubling down on my sphere. I'm doing client events. I'm reaching out to more professional contacts that could have relocation opportunities, which is what we were talking about earlier, right? There's still people moving here. This is still cheaper than California. Let's remember that. I do know that people will be leaving, and then there's some listing opportunities going to Kansas or Oklahoma or one of the Midwest states. And there will be people coming here from Chicago, from California, from Arizona, from some of the expensive areas. So focusing on the relocation opportunities, also doing more education personally. How are we sharpening our saw right now? She's taking an investing in real estate course. I love that because she's working with some demographics and some groups that are looking to invest here. And I love the fact that she's jumping in, getting the certificates and the credentials. So Jeremy Kane with EXP, very similar, working his database. He's focusing on relationships who have opportunities right now, while at the same time building solid foundation for his sphere using video and social media. Jeremy Kane, if you don't follow him, you should. He does a ton of video, ton of social media. I've got a number of people that do that and do it well.
Yes.
So definitely hold on to one of those. If you don't do it well, or you want to get sharpened up, I'd love to talk to you. I've got 2 marketing gals that are working with a lot of our agents right now, helping guide them with some social media posting and some video tips. So Jeremy, thank you for allowing me to share. And then Lindsay Benton, dear friend, known her for many years. She's focusing her team on the things that they can control, right? So controlling your controllables, staying consistent with your outreach, creative with your solutions, collaborative with your peers, and confident with your product. I think that summed it up very well. She's going into this weekend, her goal setting weekend with her team. And I love that she's doing it early. And we have our goal setting event at Columbine that's almost sold out. And it's going to be our market trends hour and then 2 hours. You got to carve out some time for this. It is a workshop. It is not about, let me just dump some stuff on you. We're going to be talking about thinking through what's important, dialing in some of those modalities, and then giving you time to capture that. Because how much time do you spend thinking about what you want to build? Right now, it's so important to do that and to identify where you're strong and literally remove the rest. Like, what are those things that are bringing you success, and stop doing the rest of it?
Right. We can't be good at everything. I think that there's a lot of pressure in this job industry to be good at everything and to find those things that you're just the best at and really hone in on those items.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed. And then I'm gonna end with this one. So this actually came from an Inman article that I read that actually had me down this path of talking about those quotes, those ideas, bringing to market. How can we continue to focus on the things that bring us success instead of getting drowned out by the negativity in the news? And I'm talking some agents that are crushing it still. I'm talking other agents that seem like crickets, and everything in between. It really is about staying true to who you are, doubling down on those activities that are working, identifying those, and removing the rest, as we just talked about. So Hazel talked about the fact that a top producer is a person who is helping as many people as possible. This article was also talking about the fact that you have to redefine top producer. And the last 2 years have been about the scoreboard, right? And so what is a top producer to you? It might not be by the scorecard in this market. And she was talking about the fact that it's when I'm helping others. That was meaningful to her, because when I'm helping others, I feel like I'm helping myself, because what we do matters. Having a place to rest, to raise your family is very important. Remembering that why we do what we do isn't for the transaction, but is because of the joy that it brings. Loving that. So with that, let's get to some of the economics that are happening. Just a couple things that was hot this week. Definitely want to talk about interest rates. Okay, so interest rates did that, the highest interest rates in 20 years. And I did highlight the fact of when they were back to, they had hit 7.22, and I captured just a smidge off. They were right at 7.22 right before this. So that was the week, March of 20 2002 is the last time we saw interest rates this high. And of course, we saw interest rates a lot higher. We had our Tuesday live talking about interest rates and the question of affordability. And it is less affordable. We all know that. Of course, homes were a lot cheaper, wages were a lot lower, but interest rates, certainly the low interest rates that we had seen, have helped with the high prices, because back when we had high interest rates, home prices were much less back then. The 10-year treasury also has been on a rampage, which is then feeding the 30-year fixed, of course. So the 10-year treasury hit a high going back to just before 2010. So we're seeing levels that we saw in 2008. If I go, we were landed at 4.14. When I last checked it, this was last night. When I checked it this morning, it was still at 4.14. So if we drag in 4.14, we've got to go back to 2008 to see numbers like that again. And to see this kind of lift is really the speed by which this change occurred is what threw most of the real estate market on its rear end. Not necessarily the high rates in and of themselves, but the speed by which we had to get here. Now, a lot of this is going to be dragging into what the Fed is going to do. We're going to talk about that for a minute, but I do have some thoughts on that, when interest rates might drop and what that might look like, and a kind of 2 time periods I'm looking at. Mortgage purchase applications came out yesterday. Yay! No, they came back to where they were 25 years ago. And you're hearing that on the news, right? Mortgage applications hit a 25-year low. None of this is good news, but it all is just simply the data by which we are working from, the data that your clients are hearing on the news. And then how do you encapsulate that to be able to give them the path back to home ownership, getting out of rent where it's 100% interest rate, getting out of a cycle of living in a home that maybe is no longer the home that either fits you, that you like, or is an area that is accommodating to the kind of lifestyle you want. Hyper focus on the why, and then really focus on the payment, not the rate. Because mortgage applications, I want to be specific about this. Mortgage applications hit a 25-year low. Mortgage purchase applications did not. They go back to 2015, which is still significant, right? 7 years, but it's not a 25-year low. The big change is in the refinances. Of course it is, because the last 2 years, everybody that could did. The people who didn't, whether they couldn't because of credit, maybe it was just bad timing, or maybe now they're refinancing due to getting separated or divorced or pulling cash out to remove debt, going into a slower economy. I mean, these are the conversations that you should be having, checking in with your database. If a recession is coming, how are you feeling about your job? What can I answer for you about your house? Do you know where the value sits today? Is it part of your financial planning journey? All of those things are conversations that can be had right now going into a changing season, talking about capitalizing on the equity that we've built over the last 2 years, and maybe looking at a home equity loan. I don't know that I would do a home equity line of credit right now, unless they have a lot of variable income that they can pay that down with, right? Because those interest rates are going up. But talking about those consolidation tactics or awareness ideas or opportunities for success, whether they're teed up to purchase or sell this year, or whether you simply tee them up to purchase or sell next year, creating that bandwidth in your pipeline for 2023. The real estate agents today and the lenders and the title reps that are doing their job right now are in the process of staying relevant, not hiding out, not burying our head in the sand, but instead facing this with information and confidence so that we can support our clients to address and to help them find the appropriate solution. Super, super important that we don't just disappear and take the rest of the year off and let them figure it out themselves.
Right.
Or really with somebody else.
Right.
Is how that's going to work.
Right. Well, and it's all of your activities for Q4 determine what your Q1 is going to look like.
100%.
And so we got to stay on it.
But
Can't
I just
take the
I
last
just
part
want
of
to
the year off.
hide.
I know. I just want to
No, you
take a
don't.
nap.
I just want. Ooh, can we?
Yeah, I know. When's the last
little-
time you took a nap?
It's been a
Nicole?
long. Well, it was yeah. I went out drinking with Lindsay Benton, and I took the first nap the next day. Thank you, Lindsay Benton. Then I've taken in a very long time. Anyway, we're gonna get back on topic. So The Federal Reserve board members are out. So after tomorrow, they can no longer talk. Zip, they have to zip their lips because there's a 2-week blackout period leading up to every Fed meeting. The Fed meeting is November 2nd, where they're going to release what they're going to do. A lot of people are talking about the fact that they're going to raise the Fed rate another 0.75%. And of course, we need to really keen in on what is said after the decision is made, right? So we want to hear, where do they think they're going? Are they going to continue to do this through March? Are they still headed to 4.5%? Or have they changed their tune to what the Fed Watch is looking at, saying that they're going to raise it to 5%? Why is that important? Because it's the instability of how hard and fast the Fed is raising the Fed rate that's creating a lot of stress in the short-term market and completely devastating the long-term bond market. That's the problem. The Fed rate does not directly correlate to the 30-year fixed rate. It is absolutely stressing out long-term bonds, which does correlate to the 30-year fixed. So a lot of the board members are coming out making statements. I grabbed 2 of them. Bullard says, I expect the central bank to end its front loading of aggressive interest rate hikes by early next year. So he's saying we're still going to do it in both November and December, but we're going to slow down early next year, which is in line with what I've been reading as far as March being the last raise hike. And he's saying we need to shift the policy to sufficiently be restrictive with only small adjustments as inflation does finally cool. Kashkari came out also saying something very similar, saying that he's seen very little evidence in his region. He's in Minneapolis, seeing very little evidence of any job loss. So he's still seeing employers are really struggling to find employees. They're having to pay them more. Wage increases is a big part of the inflation metric. 2 big things, wages and rent. So we're going to talk about rent in just a second. So those 2 things are really keeping the core inflation high, because remember that removes energy and food. Food is also very high right now. Energy is dropping, not dropping enough to make it feel like it's helping. So that core is still high. And he's saying, I'm just not seeing it yet. We need to push towards unemployment. So until I see evidence of the underlying factors driving inflation to stop climbing, I can't see how I can recommend pausing interest rate increases. So again, we're talking about, remember, employment is a lagging indicator. Regretfully, they're going to see it once they already kind of pushed us up and over the edge. And that's where the recession is going to happen. And that's where we're talking about interest rates kind of dropping. Jobless claims came out this morning, and gosh darn it, if it doesn't keep going down, jobless claims needs to go up. And I don't wish for unemployment for anyone. I don't wish for job loss for anyone. But I do know that is part of this cycle that they need to see loss of jobs so that we can see wages decrease, so that we have more job openings available or have more people for the job openings. So it went down 12,000. So that's not a good sign. We need it to turn around. We need to start going up. Remember last time unemployment numbers came out, they actually went down instead of up. So that's what we're really watching. Every week, this is going to be the big chart. When we see this starting to go up and go up consistently, is when we know we're hitting towards that tipping point of when we're going to see it. Remember, the Fed's goal is a 4.4% unemployment. Existing home sales also came out this morning, and it dropped the 8th straight month. Do remember, though, this data is coming from NAR. It is a little delayed. So this is September data. So we do not have October data, obviously. We're in the middle of October. I keep thinking that we're in November, but we're not. We're
Not
still
quite.
in October.
Not quite.
Sorry.
I still have to take the kids trick-or-treating. We're not
through it yet.
yet.
I really do. Maybe I just want for January. I want to close 2022 is what I want. All right, so existing home sales in September, I take that back. I'm going to roll that backwards and say this was just last month. So existing home sales is down, and it dropped for the 8th straight month. I'm not telling you anything you're not already feeling. We've all been feeling this as interest rates have been going up. More and more people have been deciding to hold off on purchasing. The builder confidence also dropped. So we are knee deep, like deep in a negative territory. Anything over 50% is expansionary. Anything under 50, sorry, it's not a percent, it's just an index. Anything under 50 is more recessionary, it's more contracting. We dropped below 50 before last month. So now we dropped even further from 46 to 38. So this is just an overall confidence index, much like our consumer confidence index or small business optimism index. This is the builder confidence index, and is really a timely metric for how the housing market is doing. And it is literally fallen off the cliff. It is low. Of course it is. Interest rates are high. Builders like it when interest rates are low. People can afford more. People want all the amenities with all the things and all the upgrades when interest rates are low, and they don't feel it as much. And I will say, here's a tip. If you're working with older clients, you should really consider taking the equity out of the home that they want to sell, which is not age appropriate any longer. Maybe it's a tri-level, or if it's got stairs, taking the equity out of that home, selling it, purchasing a new build with a reverse mortgage, putting only 50% down, no longer having a mortgage payment at all. Doesn't matter what the interest rate is, allowing them to get all those upgrades because they're not paying for half of the house. Right? I mean, if I was a real estate agent, I would be knocking on every door that I knew where, especially with the builders right now, buying down interest rates or finishing basements or dropping prices for any homes that are coming on the market right now. Because as we're going to see, those homes that are coming back, or not back, but coming on the market, new builds, is increasing. So we do have opportunities. Hyper focus on those aging population. If it's an age appropriate house, get into a reverse mortgage. It doesn't matter what the interest rate is. So permit starts and completions all came out. The big numbers that we're watching is the single families. The permits were up, but single families were down 3%. Starts was down. Builders aren't starting homes right now. They're waiting to see the temperature and getting all of the builds that they have in process to completion. Completions is up good. They're getting those finally through the pipeline. Our single families is up slightly, 3%. This is really good. Household formations is still between 1.6 and 1.7 million annualized. This is not keeping up, considering 3/4 of all homes that do have a mortgage payment have a locked-in rate under 4%. So we need to see more new builds, not only just permitted up is good, but we need to see them started. We need to see them in progress. And we need to see them completed. Interesting, all-time record of under construction right now. That's not necessarily a good thing. It means that those single families have been stalled, and multi-units as well, stalled due to whether it's supply or labor. As you guys know, I'm building a house. I'm seeing it. Our closing date just got kicked back 4 months because of this.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, and everybody I talk to is feeling similar stories, but what we're not seeing on this one is the single families continue to be strong. That is already starting to wane. The new single families that you're seeing on are either just working their way through the pipeline. They were under contract, they're back to off a contract, but the multi-units is increasing. Now, this is a good thing for rents, right? So it's certainly going to help. And renters, many renters, we want them to be buyers, but if we do see the job loss, we're typically going to see that on the lower income. They are going to continue to renting. They do have a little bit of a reprieve. This report just came out yesterday showing the Denver rents declined actually 0.2% month over month, still up year over year, but declined softly. We're seeing a softening all over, nationally, state-wise, and Denver-wise. So we're going to continue to see this soften as more and more of those multi-units come on the market, right? And we're seeing all the building going on right now in Denver. As you're seeing more of those new apartment buildings. I mean, I live near Downing and Evans right now. There are massive apartment buildings being built right over there. Monstrous. I'm just like this, the whole landscape of Broadway is changing tremendously to see these monster apartment buildings being built. That will help soften some of this rent. And why do I love that so much? I love that because the inflation numbers are tied to rent. So it is the owner's expectation of rent. What do I think I can rent my home for? And rent. So those two numbers, as they soften, we're going to see core inflation going down, which is what the Fed needs to see to pull off of the raising of the Fed rate with the extreme nature that they're doing it right now. So this is all good news. And of course, it's great news for affordability across the country, and it's certainly here in Metro. We did see a couple of areas, and this is per the apartment list website. You can go check it out. You check out your Metro. Castle Rock and Parker saw a little bit more of a dip. I don't know. Are there more multi-unit apartment buildings being built in Castle Rock and Parker?
You know, there is more development that happens down in Castle
Around
Rock
there?
and Parker than there is in other parts of Metro Denver because there's land to be acquired down
There
there.
is land to be acquired.
And so,
down there.
whereas we're in urban
Yeah.
densely populated areas, we're not seeing the same level of development because land is expensive.
Yes.
Versus going down to Castle Rock and Parker, they're able to acquire land at a much a lower rate and being able to develop those. I've
That might
seen an
make
overall
sense.
softening in those markets when I look at the monthly numbers for those zip codes, where I'm seeing more price decreases, I'm seeing less than asking price,
Yeah.
I'm seeing less multiple offers.
Yes.
And so I'm definitely seeing a softening in that market.
So that is good news for renters. Obviously, it's going to help some of those people with affordability, maybe save up more for the home that they want to purchase next year. It's not a bad thing. They were going up rather quickly and really high. We're still up across all metros or across all micro areas up year over year. So it's still high. It's just softening. And as we were talking about the inventory, when you see those inventory numbers being low going into January, this is a nationwide problem, right? And I keep kind of going back to this because relocation opportunities do exist, right? You've got areas that are seeing that softening or are seeing it's too expensive or affordability issues or what's happening across the country. Partnering with people on both ends, partnering with people, real estate agents in the more expensive metros and the lower expensive metros, offering your clients that concierge service across the country, because inventory will continue to be an issue going into next spring when those interest rates do drop, offering buyers the opportunity to get back in. I mean, we've got 1.28 million. This is extremely low, especially when we typically have over 2 to 2.5. If you look at Altos, it's even lower because he takes off any pendings. He has us at 5.66. 566,000. So I did a Tuesday live. I do a live every Tuesday talking about the last 3 minutes of that live is where the gold is, really hyper focusing on the payment, right? Everybody wants to say, I woulda, shoulda, coulda locked at 3.25, but I didn't. And getting really upset about the fact that they didn't get a 3.25 rate. What you also didn't get was a house for 100 to 200 to 300,000 over asking. What you also didn't get was a house on a busy street that you didn't really want. What you also didn't get was the lack of opportunity to negotiate for anything that needed to be fixed. Right? You didn't get any of those things. So now what you do is you have time. You do have the ability to negotiate. You do have the ability to address any lack of maintained items. So all of that is, yes, we're doing it at the higher interest rate. So everybody wants to say, well, but my payment is so much higher now than it would have been. Well, taking into account whether it's a deal that you can get on the purchase price or getting those inspection items, we are going to see interest rates settle back in to what nobody can say with 100% certainty. But I do see that we're going to continue to have volatility through the end of the year. We are going to see the inflation rates compared to last year being lower month over month, or the year over year comparison, sorry, to fourth quarter last year, which could give us a little bit of relief on the inflation numbers, although I don't know how real it will be. It'll be more comparison as far as, so we might see a little bit of a pullback on our 30-year fixed. And then once we go into a recession, we will start to see that as well. And if the Fed does continue to raise that Fed rate through March, and we see that recession happen, that could happen late spring, early summer next year. And then I kind of throw out, if it doesn't happen, and if the Fed raises the Fed rate and it stays there and the economy doesn't fully soften and employment hangs on, it could hold out until early 2024. That's kind of worst case scenario. But remember, all seasons, they come and then they do go. There will be an end to this. So it's how are we communicating and focusing in on the payment, not the interest rate. And really quickly, with a minute left or a couple minutes left, I just want to, a couple people asked me this, so I just wanted to share this, and we're going to put it up on our Facebook group. But that asset depletion with the 10-year is really a phenomenal product. It's a 5-year ARM. But if you have the opportunity, or have a situation, I should say, where you can't use all of your income, maybe there's a spouse or significant other that can't go on the loan that has income, you can afford more home, but on paper, you cannot qualify, but you have assets you don't want to touch. Now, Fannie and Freddie restricts you to retirement age, but this is allowing you to say, okay, if I have it sitting in a checking account, I can use 100% of that. If I have it sitting in stocks and bonds and I don't want to pull it out right now because I'm pulling it out at the worst time, you want to let it rebound. If you didn't already do it and pull the cash earlier, you can use 85% of that value. Or if it isn't a retirement account, regardless of how old you are, you don't have to be retirement age, I can use 80% of that. And then I divide that full amount by 10 years or 120 months. And I can add that to other income you have, whether it's pension income, Social Security income, W-2 income, maybe it's validated self-employed income, any of those things. I can double up the income, allowing you to qualify for more home. That's
powerful.
Such a powerful product right now. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. We'll see if we have any questions. But you've got to get creative in this market. Are you using bridge loans to help people to get in that might not be able to get in? Are you using something like this asset depletion? Are you communicating with where they are in life? All right. Would this program work with equity in real estate? No, because that would be a HELOC or a HELOAN is what that would be. So we can't use the equity in real estate, but in more traditional assets. Paul, thank you so much. Just loving all the data. Are we not in a recession? Eric says there is debate. I personally am on the camp that we are not in a recession yet because we have not seen we've seen the quarter over quarter decline in GDP, but that was more due to inventory issues, not consumer spending. Consumers are hanging on with everything that they've got and they continue to spend. Yes, that's why. Did you answer that one? You answered, Steve.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Well, those are all answered. So that's everything we've got for you guys. Thanks for tuning in this week, as you do every week. We'll be back at it again next week with our quick market update going on for an hour next Thursday at 10 o'clock. So please feel free to join us back here. We'd love to see you guys again. And if you have any specific questions for us, reach out, fire us an email, because we're always looking for ideas and content or what you're struggling with so that we can help you better advise your buyers and sellers. We certainly hope that if we're able to help you better advise your buyers and sellers, that in turn that will land at One Trust Mortgage with Nicole Ruth.
Yes.
Or the land at First American Title with me and Megan Eller. So I hope that we get to see you guys at our closing tables very soon. Other than that, we hope we have a great rest of the week and have a nice weekend. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.